Neanderthals are an extinct species that were very similar to humans and died out roughly 30,000 years ago.
What if I told you that hidden inside your DNA right now is a story no one can fully explain? Not Neanderthals.
Neanderthals are often depicted as brutish cavemen.
Not Denisovans. Something else. Something older. Something that lived alongside our ancestors, had children with them, passed down its genes for tens of thousands of years, and then vanished without a trace. Scientists kept seeing it again and again, running test after test, hoping it would disappear. It never did. This ghost DNA is real. It exists in millions of people alive today, and it tells a story that shakes the foundations of human history. Tonight, we follow the trail of this invisible lineage, exploring the greatest genetic mystery of our time, and the question it forces us to ask: who were these unknown ancestors, and what does their legacy mean for us today? At the ghost species. You have a picture of what these researchers were dealing with. Imagine you have spent your entire career mapping the human family tree. You know the branches. You know the relationships. Homo sapiens here.
Neanderthals are a subspecies of Homo sapiens.
Neanderthals there. Denisovans over there. All connected by evolutionary pathways that make sense, that follow predictable patterns, that fit together like pieces of a puzzle. Now imagine finding a piece that belongs to no puzzle you have ever seen. That is exactly what happened. The genetic marker they discovered was too complex to be a random mutation, too consistent across populations to be an error, too structured to be anything other than what it appeared to be. DNA from something else, something human-like, certainly, something close enough to our ancestors that they could produce healthy children together, but different enough that it stands out in the genetic record like a signal from another world. The scientists began calling it ghost DNA because that is exactly what it felt like. The presence of something that should not exist. The shadow of beings who left their genetic fingerprints all over our species, but somehow managed to disappear without leaving any other trace. No fossils, no tools, no cave paintings. Nothing but this haunting genetic signature passed down through generations of human beings who never knew it was there. The timeline made everything more disturbing. The marker appeared strongest in humans who lived between 70,000 and 30,000 years ago. That is a 40,000-year window during which whatever left this DNA was actively breeding with our ancestors across multiple continents. Then, at around 20,000 years ago, the marker began to fade. By 10,000 years ago, it was almost gone. Something happened. The ghost population either died out, stopped mixing with humans, or disappeared in some way that defies conventional explanation. And the question that kept everyone awake at night was simple and terrifying. How does an entire species vanish so completely? Extinction is messy. It leaves evidence, bones scattered in caves, remains preserved in bogs. Something. But this ghost population left nothing except their DNA. It was as if they existed in some parallel dimension, touching our world only occasionally, leaving genetic evidence of their presence, and then retreating into an oblivion from which no physical trace could ever be recovered. Not secrets in the genome. When the scientists fully understood what they had found, they did not rush to announce it. They sat in their laboratories, staring at each other, understanding that they were holding information that could shake the foundations of everything we thought we knew about human origins. Phone calls were made. Private emails were sent. Within weeks, small groups of geneticists from around the world were meeting behind closed doors, speaking in hushed tones, trying to figure out what to do with a discovery that seemed too impossible to be true. The atmosphere in the scientific community shifted. Graduate students noticed their professors becoming secretive and stressed. Senior researchers started disappearing to emergency meetings without explanation. Something massive was happening. But only a handful of people knew what it was. The debate that followed was fierce. Some argued they should keep quiet until they understood more. After all, announcing that ancient humans carried DNA from an unknown source, without being able to explain what that source was, would create chaos. The media would sensationalize it. Conspiracy theorists would have a field day. Better to solve the mystery first, then present the complete picture. But others disagreed. Science is supposed to be open. Hiding a major discovery about human evolution felt like a betrayal of everything the field stood for.
Neanderthals were stupid, primitive subhumans, shambling, lacking symbolism. Turns out that that's not true at all.
And besides, secrets rarely stay secret forever. Someone would leak. Someone always does. The tension grew worse as months passed. Different research teams had found evidence of the marker independently, and now they were racing against each other. Everyone wanted credit. Everyone feared being wrong. Trust between colleagues began to break down. Papers were submitted to journals with vague findings, editors demanding more information, researchers stalling while they gathered more data. Then the inevitable happened. Someone leaked information to a science blogger. Just a whisper. A hint of something shocking that geneticists were allegedly keeping under wraps. The story spread like wildfire through online forums and discussion boards. Speculation ran rampant, and the cover-up, such as it was, began to crumble. The truth was coming out whether the scientists were ready or not. DNA without bones. With the secret slipping away, researchers had no choice but to dig deeper. They pulled every ancient DNA sample they could find from laboratories and museums worldwide, mapping exactly where and when the ghost marker appeared. The results were unsettling. The geographic distribution made no sense according to conventional models. The marker showed up in Siberian caves, European burial sites, Middle Eastern settlements, and Asian fossils. These were not populations that should have been connected. These were groups separated by thousands of miles and harsh terrain that ancient humans could not easily cross. Yet somehow they all carried the same genetic signature. The implication was staggering. Whatever left this marker had not just encountered our ancestors once in some isolated event. It had interbred with humans multiple times, in multiple places, over tens of thousands of years. This was sustained, and repeated contact between ancient humans and something else, something that lived near them, interacted with them regularly, became part of their communities in ways we can barely comprehend today. Computer models were built to understand how this ghost population might have moved and mixed with humans. Every simulation returned the same disturbing pattern. The genetic evidence did not suggest random encounters. It suggested organized, deliberate interaction. Whatever these beings were, they were not stumbling into human camps by accident. They were living alongside our ancestors, generation after generation, weaving their DNA into our species until it became part of who we are. But every attempt to identify where they came from led to dead ends. If this was an unknown human species, where did they originate? Where did they live? Why have we never found a single bone that definitively belongs to them? Some species leave behind thousands of fossils. This ghost population left nothing but genetic breadcrumbs. It was as if they deliberately avoided leaving any physical trace, which is impossible, or as if something happened that destroyed every piece of evidence that might have proven they existed. The lost ancestors. The implications of this discovery are like pulling a loose thread and watching an entire tapestry unravel. For decades, we have told ourselves a comfortable story about human evolution. We evolved in Africa, spread across the world, mixed occasionally with Neanderthals and Denisovans, and eventually became the only humans left. Simple, clean, easy to understand. The ghost population destroys that narrative completely, as it means our ancestors were sharing this planet with far more groups than we ever imagined, and we have no idea who most of them were.
Interesting species. It's not very much like anything we've found before, so I doubt if there's going to be much argument that this represents a new species.
The human family tree, which scientists have drawn and redrawn countless times over the years, suddenly has a massive blank space in it. There is an entire branch missing, a lineage that should exist but does not. These ghost beings had to come from somewhere. They had to be related to us somehow. But where do they fit? Did they split off from early humans millions of years ago? Did they evolve separately in some isolated corner of the world? Or were they something else entirely, something we do not yet have the vocabulary to describe? The evidence suggests these beings were remarkably widespread and successful. They were not confined to one region or ecosystem. They managed to interact with human populations across Africa, Europe, and Asia over tens of thousands of years. That level of distribution requires intelligence, adaptability, and social organization. These were not primitive creatures stumbling through the wilderness. They were sophisticated enough to thrive alongside humans during one of the most challenging periods in prehistoric history. What disturbs researchers most is thinking about what this mixing actually meant. When ancient humans and the ghost population had children together, those children survived and passed on their genes. That means the two groups were genetically compatible, close enough to breed with, close enough to live with, perhaps close enough to communicate with. And yet we know absolutely nothing about who they were or how they experienced the world. Timeline gaps that once puzzled scientists suddenly make a terrible kind of sense. There were always periods in human history where populations seemed to change rapidly, where new technologies appeared seemingly out of nowhere, where human behavior shifted in ways that defied explanation. Maybe those changes were not humans evolving on their own. Maybe they were the result of contact with this ghost population. Maybe we learned things from them. Maybe they learned things from us. And maybe that exchange shaped both groups in ways that echoed through all of history. But the darkest question remained unanswered. If this ghost population was so widespread and successful, why did they disappear? What happened between 30,000 and 10,000 years ago that erased them from existence? Did humans kill them off? Did they die from some catastrophe we have no record of? Or did something stranger happen, something we have not even begun to consider? Genetic ghosts. When faced with something impossible, scientists did what they always do. They tried desperately to explain it away. Nobody wanted this mystery to be real. Nobody wanted to rewrite everything we know about human evolution based on some inexplicable genetic marker. So they searched for any alternative that could make the problem disappear. They threw every conventional explanation at it, hoping something would stick, hoping they could go back to their comfortable understanding of human history and pretend this nightmare had never happened. What they found only deepened the mystery and pushed them further into territory that made even the most experienced researchers profoundly uncomfortable. The first hope was contamination. This was the easiest explanation, the one everyone wanted to believe. Lab samples get corrupted all the time. A stray hair falls into a test tube. A technician touches something they should not have touched. Bacteria infiltrate ancient bone fragments. It happens more often than the public realizes, and it has derailed genetic studies before. So research teams went back and retested everything using the strictest protocols imaginable. They worked in sterile environments sealed off from any possible contamination. They used fresh equipment that had never touched another sample. They implemented multiple verification steps at every stage of the process. And they ran the tests dozens of times, praying that just once the marker would fail to appear. It never did. The marker was still there, stubborn and undeniable, staring back at them from every screen. It was not contaminated. It was real. And that realization sent a cold shiver through laboratories around the world. Then scientists wondered if maybe this was just a natural mutation. After all, DNA mutates constantly. Every time a cell divides, there is a chance for errors, for changes, for something new to emerge. Maybe this marker was just an unusual but perfectly normal human variation that looked strange simply because we had never encountered it before. Maybe it was a genetic quirk that had been hiding in plain sight all along, and we were making a mountain out of a molehill. Researchers clung to this hope like a lifeline. But when they ran the detailed genetic analysis, that theory collapsed too. The marker was too complex to be a random accident, too different from anything in the human genetic repertoire, too structured and organized to have emerged from simple mutation. It had the unmistakable signature of something that came from outside the main human lineage entirely. This was not a quirk. This was not an error. This was evidence of contact with something else. Some researchers proposed what became known as the remnant DNA hypothesis.
Scientists create synthetic life using chemicals in a lab.
Perhaps this marker was leftover genetic material from a very ancient human ancestor, something that had been hiding dormant in our DNA for hundreds of thousands of years. Genetic echoes from the distant past that only showed up occasionally in certain populations, like old photographs surfacing from a forgotten attic. It sounded reasonable. It offered a way out of the nightmare. But this theory had a fatal flaw that destroyed it completely. The marker appeared too frequently and too recently to be an ancient remnant. It was strongest in humans who lived around 50,000 years ago, which meant whatever left it was alive and actively breeding with our ancestors at that time. This was not an echo from the distant past. This was fresh contact. This was ongoing interaction. This was something that existed alongside humans and left its genetic fingerprints everywhere. Every conventional explanation failed in exactly the same way. Scientists tested for errors in their dating methods, wondering if perhaps the samples were younger or older than they thought. The dates were correct. They looked for geological explanations, and thinking maybe something in the burial environment, some mineral or chemical process, could have altered the DNA in ways that created false patterns. Nothing environmental could produce this signature. They even considered whether the extraction process itself was somehow generating false positives, creating markers that did not really exist in the original samples. Extensive testing proved it was not. The marker was exactly what it appeared to be. Undeniable evidence of an unknown population that lived alongside humans, bred with them repeatedly across multiple continents over tens of thousands of years, and then vanished so completely that not a single bone, not a single tooth, not a single fragment of physical evidence survived to tell us who they were or where they went. The modern implications. Once scientists accepted that the ghost DNA was real, a new fear took hold. If ancient humans carried this marker, did anyone alive today still have it? The question haunted research laboratories around the world because if modern people carried remnants of this mystery DNA, everything changed. It was not just ancient history anymore. It was the present. It was us. The search began quietly. Researchers screened modern genetic databases, looking for any trace of the marker in living populations. DNA samples from thousands of people across every continent were examined, searching for that distinctive signature. What they found sent chills through the scientific community. The marker was not gone. It was still here. Small fragments of ghost DNA showed up in scattered populations around the world. Not everyone had it. Not even most people, but enough did that it could not be ignored. People living in remote regions of Asia showed traces. Some European populations carried tiny pieces. Isolated groups in Africa and the Middle East had fragments of this ancient genetic legacy buried in their chromosomes. The ghost population had left descendants, and they were walking among us, most of them completely unaware of what was in their blood. The medical implications were staggering. Every piece of DNA in your body does something. It affects how your body functions, how it responds to disease, how it processes the world around you. This mystery DNA was no different. It had been mixing with human genes for thousands of years, becoming part of how some people's bodies operated. but nobody knew what it actually did. Was it helpful? Was it harmful? Was it something in between? Research teams started looking for health patterns in people who carried fragments of the marker. Did they have higher rates of certain diseases, better immune systems, unusual physical or mental traits? The early findings were disturbing precisely because they were contradictory. Some carriers seemed to have enhanced resistance to certain infections, which made sense if the ghost population had adapted to different diseases than regular humans. But others showed increased susceptibility to autoimmune disorders, as if their immune systems were confused by having two different genetic blueprints trying to operate at once. There were hints of other effects too, things researchers barely wanted to mention in their papers. Some studies suggested carriers might have subtle differences in brain structure, now variations in how certain neurotransmitters functioned, changes in pain perception or sensory processing. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just small differences that made people wonder what the ghost population was really like, how their minds worked, how they experienced reality. Echoes in our DNA years have passed since the first discovery of the ghost DNA marker, and if anything, the mystery has only deepened. What scientists hoped would become clearer with more research has instead fractured into competing theories, contradictory evidence, and uncomfortable truths that challenge everything we thought we knew about being human. The panic has faded somewhat, replaced by a darker, more persistent unease that refuses to go away. Today, multiple research teams around the world are pursuing different angles on the same puzzle, and their findings do not always agree. Some laboratories insist the ghost population was a distinct human species that evolved separately from Homo sapiens, perhaps in an isolated region we have not identified yet. They point to subtle genetic markers that suggest deep evolutionary divergence, maybe going back 500,000 years or more. These researchers believe the ghost population developed independently, adapted to different environments, and only later came into contact with our ancestors. But other scientists argue the evidence points to something stranger. They have found patterns in the DNA that do not match any known evolutionary pathway. The ghost marker contains genetic sequences that appear too organized, too specific, almost as if they were designed rather than naturally evolved. These researchers will not say what they think that means, not publicly anyway, but their papers hint at possibilities that make their colleagues deeply uncomfortable. The international collaboration that formed to study this phenomenon has become one of the largest scientific efforts in history. Laboratories share data across borders. Archaeological sites are being re-examined with new techniques. Ancient DNA samples are being extracted from bones that were previously thought too damaged to yield genetic information. Every month brings new findings, but none of them provide the simple answer everyone hoped for. What we know for certain now is limited but significant. The ghost population definitely existed. They were human-like enough to produce fertile offspring with Homo sapiens, and which means they could not have been too genetically distant from us. They were widespread across multiple continents during a specific window of time, and then they disappeared, leaving behind only fragments of DNA in human populations that persist to this day. We also know that modern humans carry remnants of this ghost DNA in varying amounts. The distribution is not random. Certain populations have more of it than others, though the reasons for this remain unclear. Research into what these genetic fragments actually do continues, but progress is slow and often contradictory. What remains speculation, though heavily debated speculation, is almost everything else. Where did the ghost population originate? What did they look like? How did they live? What happened to them? Different research teams have different answers, and nobody can prove their theory is correct. Some believe climate change drove them to extinction. Others think human expansion gradually absorbed them through interbreeding until they ceased to exist as a distinct group. A few researchers propose darker scenarios involving conflict and violence, though the genetic evidence does not strongly support this. The most disturbing aspect is what has not been found. Despite decades of archaeological work, not a single fossil has been definitively identified as belonging to the ghost population. They remain exactly what their name suggests: ghosts. Present in our genetic code, absent from our understanding. The ghost population is still with us. Their genes flow through millions of people, shaping who we are, even as their true identity remains a mystery. They lived, they vanished, and yet a part of them endures, hidden in plain sight, inside every cell, every heartbeat, every thought. The questions they leave behind are endless. Who were they? What did they know? And how did they shape the world we inherited? Humanity carries their secret, and science has only begun to uncover it. The story is far from over. The real question is this: when we finally understand the ghost DNA, what will it reveal about us, and what we thought we knew about our own history?